The patch has now finally arrived, guys, and there are a lot of stuff to go over. This is going to be a juicy video. I am only covering the main points of this patch, the key areas, so I'm not going to go over literally every single thing, but I have linked the patch notes in the description for you anyway. So to start things off, guys, we're going to be going over the balancing. The patch note says, balancing, goal with stratagem balance changes this patch. With these balance changes, we wanted to buff up some of the weaker stratagems to make them more viable and add more possibility for the variety in the loadouts. We also changed a few to make them more consistent, but the goal was to keep a similar or higher power level. We are looking into the stratagems more to see if there are any other stratagems that might need some buffs or changes to make them more viable. We also want to be better at explaining what our goals are with the changes. Please see the linked blog post for more information. We are actually going to go over that just in a second, but yeah, we have some ridiculous changes here. Coming in with the rocket sentry, decreased spread, prioritizing larger targets, increased target distance from 75 to 100 meters, decreased rockets per salvo 2 to 1 to get a better ammo economy, decreased explosion radius from 1 meter to 4 meters, decreased explosion armor penetration, explosion can no longer damage heavy armored enemies, the projectile still has enough AP to damage heavily armored targets, increased projectile damage from 200 to 300. Now all I'm going to say is most of this stuff is definitely buffed. I mean, I'm not really complaining because I think these buffs are absolutely amazing. I think I will say this on everyone's behalf. These changes are awesome and they are definitely needed. If you literally have a different opinion to me, please drop it in the comments because I want to hear your thoughts on this new patch. But 100 changes, you know, and fixes, we can't really go wrong there. Now we're moving on to the machine gun sentry. Apparently it's got a reduction in cooldown from 180 seconds to 120 seconds. And also apparently the gatling sentry, the rocket sentry, the auto cannon sentry, mortar sentry and the EMS mortar sentry also has an increased durability now from 0% to 80%. So yeah, some major bumps there, and honestly these are absolutely awesome changes. This is going to make using them sentries so much better, honestly. I mean, being able to just cool down a machine gun sentry so quickly will make this a lot more powerful stratagem basically to have in your arsenal. I think I'd probably be more likely to use it now since the cooldown reduction is a lot less. You know, if you can throw it down all the time, you know, as often as possible, it's going to become so handy. This basically just means, guys, they're going to sustain so much more damage, which is a huge plus regarding obviously the increased durability for the sentries. There are also a lot of stuff going on with the mines here as well, which basically reads MD6 anti-personal minefield, increased explosion damage from 250 to 350, and the incendiary mines has an increased explosion damage from 150 to 210. So a pretty big jump there in obviously damage, and I mean I use the minefields quite often. I find it's quite good with the defensive missions, so this is just going to make things 10 times better. We have also got word on the orbital gatling strikes, which I don't ever use if I'm honest, but this is what it says. Increased fire rate by 25%, increase rounds per salvo from 30 to 60, increased armor penetration, can damage heavy armored enemies, and lastly, decreased cooldown from 80 seconds to 70 seconds. I mean, a 10-second decrease in the cooldown, I mean, it's not that much, but I guess it will make it a little bit better using obviously the stratagem now. So definitely a viable option. I mean, I hardly ever use it if I'm honest with you, but maybe I'll give it a try now. I will probably also give some other things as well a try, because actually this says here, the orbital precision strike now basically has a decreased cooldown from 100 seconds to 90 seconds. So again, a 10-second decrease. And also apparently it has a decreased spawn cooldown time from 4 seconds to 2 seconds, which again, 2-second decrease. So that's not obviously major changes, but I do think it makes it worthwhile to use now, honestly. The Eagles have had some changes too, which you can see this on screen here. Eagle 110mm rocket pods. While these changes may look like a straight up nerf, that is not the intention. Please see the blog post for more information. Improved targeting, increased projectile armor penetration, now does 100% damage to heavily armored enemies instead of 50%. Decreased projectile damage 600 to 250 to compensate for the improved targeting and the extra damage from the increased armor penetration. Decreased explosion armor penetration, explosion can no longer damage heavily armored enemies. I mean, I quite use the rocket pods, I quite like them, if I'm honest with you, but it's going to make them so much better to use now. So if you don't use them, this would be a better time, if any. So yeah, go and give them a go now. I think the rocket pods are going to be so worthwhile to use now. There are also changes to some of the support weapons as well, like the heavy machine gun. There's just so much going on, guys. I mean, the amount of changes and fixes are just insane. I mean, I don't know how long it took them to do this, but yeah, it's just madness. So with the heavy machine gun, you can see that they've increased the projectile damage from 100 to 150, so pretty much a 50% increase. And then the increased projectile damage against durable body parts has had a increase from 23% to 33%. And what's notable here though, guys, is also the cooldown time has been changed from 7 to 5.5 seconds. So I think that's absolutely amazing that they're going to make it a bit easier to reload, because it can be so hard to reload this gun when you're getting chased by so many enemies. This also goes for the MG43 machine gun as well. Now I've put some screenshots up on screen, so you guys can go ahead and read these if you want to. A lot of this is just basically buffs and more buffs. I mean, I'm not complaining, but yeah, this is great stuff, honestly. This is something we have been waiting for, changes to the Liberator concussive, as well as a lot more. So this basically has an increased projectile damage against durable body parts from 23% to 35%. That's quite a big jump, to be honest with you. Not a huge jump, but it's going to obviously really show in game. The adjusticator has an increased magazine capacity now from 25 to 30. I mean, I don't really use them guns a lot. I mean, I use the sickle. You know, the sickle is a pretty good gun. And the Tenderizer, you know, that weren't really great, obviously, before this update. But since obviously that's also been fixed, I guess it's going to be obviously quite good to use now. But yeah, I don't really use these guns, if I'm honest with you. But at least for anybody who does use them, it's going to make it a better experience. Talking about the Tenderizer, that is literally what we're going to be moving on to now. So the Tenderizer has an increased projectile damage from 60 to 95, so a massive leap there. And an increased projectile damage against durable body parts from 10% to 17%. And then obviously to combat that, they've decreased the ammo capacity from 35 to 30. And then obviously decreased the number of magazines from 10 to 8. So yeah, I mean, some positive and negatives, but if I'm honest with you, this is some massive positive changes. And for anybody who uses a Tenderizer, they're going to absolutely love this. Now, there are a lot of other weapons as well that have had some major changes, such as these ones. The Eruptor has increased total damage from 420 to 570 damage per shot, which is not a massive leap again, but you're going to notice it in game if you obviously used it before and you didn't really like it. And the Diligence also has an increased projectile damage against durable body parts from 10% to 25% as well. Maybe I'm going to have to give the Eruptor a go now. I haven't really gave it a chance, so maybe the Eruptor and Tenderizer I need to give a proper go now, since obviously they've been basically fixed and updated. Apparently we have had some major changes to the sniper scopes as well, and also the recoil stance modifiers, basically to make them more consistent and also reward you for being prone more. So yeah, a lot of these changes are hella sick, honestly. I mean, we have needed this for such a long time, guys, so I'm really glad they have finally dropped this into the game. Now, as I stated, guys, I'm not literally going to go over every single thing, because we'd be here literally all day. So we're just going to be basically going over literally the main stuff, all the main points. We're going to be talking about the modifiers for missions. Some liked it, some didn't like it. I actually personally really liked this. It made it a little bit harder, but then again, I didn't understand, like some other people, why this was in the game in the first place anyway. You know, just removing stratagems for certain missions. It basically reads: removed operation modifier AA defenses, reducing the stratagem slots by 1. We want to look over the operation modifiers in the future. Right now there are too few of them which become repetitive, and the ones we have do not create variety or promote different playstyles. For now, we remove this one because it only encourages the players to bring the best stratagems and does not promote variety. So yeah, you can kind of understand why they did that. I mean, I quite liked it. You know, it made it a little bit more difficult, but then again, yeah, it doesn't really promote obviously that variety of playstyle. So yeah, I think it's quite the right direction. One thing to note here, they've also disabled the retrieve mission too. They say that this is to give the mission the proper attention and care that it deserves, as it is now deemed not fun enough or performing as we want it to. You know what, I didn't actually really play that very much, that retrieve mission. I mean, there's so many missions I was playing, but I never really played that one a lot. Now, as far as super samples go, you can actually obtain those on difficulty 6. It reads: super samples now spawn on difficulty 6. The reason for this change is that we feel that their existence only on difficulty 7+, force some players to play the game on a harder difficulty than they wanted to comfortably play on. We do, however, still want a gating of them, but a less punishing one. This next one I quite like. I think you should still be able to use those without any interference, since you know it's on the ground, you know it's not in the sky, you know in your ship where your stratagems deploy, it's on the ground. So I think this is actually a major win, you know, a major win. The SEAF or SEAF artillery stratagem is no longer blocked by stratagem jammers or iron storms, and is available after the mission time ends and the destroyer leaves a close orbit. Enemies in melee range of the gates in the evacuate high value assets mission will now attack it more consistently. Added the ability to chat from in-game menus and mission loading screens. Updated some first person crosshairs to improve readability. This one is for those who just like to play on their own basically, or maybe just with certain friends. So you can basically now just have invite only lobbies, so that's pretty cool. There's loads, and I mean loads of planetary hazards now. I'm not going to go over this, but you can give it a read if you wish. The amount of stuff here though, guys, is absolutely so crazy. It's just like the best update we've had so far. And let me just point this out. Yeah, let me just point this out. The most needed update, okay? The most needed update in Helldivers 2. Visibility improvements. Now, this is funny because I actually mentioned this on a previous video. Someone asked about it, and I actually thought it would not enter the game until a later patch. But it actually seems it has, so that was pretty quick. I mean, really quick. Maybe they caught on to it before anyone mentioned it, but yeah, at least we can see some visibility improvements in the game now. Enemies. The acid effect applied by hunters, bug mines, etc. now allows you to sprint while under the effect and slows you by 30% instead of 50%. This is a massive win, honestly, because the acid effect, honestly, was just so annoying in the game. You just get shot over and over and over again by multiple enemies, and you just couldn't run, and you're just basically in an endless loop. And then when you get shot obviously multiple times, you end up getting killed so quickly. Next thing we're going to go over is actually an important one, and this says we have toned down the amount of heavily armored enemies like Bowl Titans charges on high difficulties, and instead spawn more hordes of smaller enemies. The difference should be quite noticeable, and the amount should be at least 30% less than before during bug breaches. We have also toned down slightly how many hulks that spawn for the automatons. Our intent is to ease up on the demand of anti-tank weapons, and by having more of the other enemies give a better incentive for a group to bring stratagems and weapons that take care of hordes. I actually think this is great because I like more enemies. You know, I'm one of those guys who like playing World War Z, you know, has like a crap ton of enemies coming after you. So I really like this. And sometimes when you just have loads and loads of hulks and hard enemies coming after you with like a bunch of obviously other enemies, it can be so difficult. You've got to really decide what is the most important stratagem to bring, because ultimately you can't have everything. So if you bring stuff for obviously the easier enemies, that's going to be no problem, but then you're going to have like a tougher time against obviously all the hulks and everything, and vice versa. This though is what everybody has been waiting for, reverting back to the original update. Patrol spawning is now back to how it worked before, with some slight tweaks so that the levels are less empty if you are far away from important locations with enemy presence. Medium and large size enemies now don't get stunned as easily. This will not affect the stratagems that stun, and will mostly just affect how easily the pummeler can stun larger enemies. Now there's also a lot of changes to the Terminids. I'm not going to go over every single one of them, but I have put it on screen if you want to give it a read. Automatons actually have less changes now, which I'm kind of confused about, but again I'm kind of okay with, because I think in my opinion the automatons are pretty fun to fight. I've never really had any major issues with them. Maybe sometimes, you know, too many hulks or tanks, but I've never really had as much of a problem fighting them, whereas the Terminids I just have no end of problems. I mean literally no end of problems. A huge takeaway though from this is the Hulk's flamethrowers that does less damage, which is a bonus honestly. I mean the distance and the damage of that was just too crazy. You'd get killed so far away and so fast, and even if you wasn't close to the Hulk you'd still get killed pretty damn fast, and there was literally no escaping it. If you dropped in, you're right next to a Hulk, you're dead. Literally there's no escaping it, you're dead. Unless you can stim literally right in time. Moving on to the Galactic war map. Introducing supply lines and origin of attacks. Supply lines were previously not shown on the Galactic war map to reduce clutter and improve readability. You will now also be able to see which planet an attack is originating from, potentially allowing for the community to stop the attack at its source. We have also updated visuals in the sector and planet information pop-ups. This will make things 10 times easier to actually know, you know, the route of where you got to go to obviously liberate a designated planet. The last thing we are going to go over is a message by Johan, and this basically says, now in the Chief Creative Officer position at Arrowhead, first I want to thank you, the community, for clearly voicing your opinions and concerns for the balance and fun of the game. With that, we have gone over a lot of weapon and stratagem balance in our latest patch. Anyway guys, what do you think of these changes? Let me know in the comments, because I personally think these are actually major changes in the game, has needed this for a long time. But yeah, let me know, voice your opinions, have a conversation back and forth, you know. So without further ado guys, if you want to see more Helldivers 2 videos, be sure to subscribe and I will see you in the next one. So yeah, go and conquer the galaxy for democracy, you know, not communism, not communism.